the catalyst for me, though, was in 2020 when I started to see really just terrible things be justified in the name of leftism and equality and progress during the riots.
Yeah.
So there was so much destruction of people's private property, like literally like people's homes, people's small businesses, and just actual violence towards people. And I was still kind of like one foot in leftism at that time because I hadn't really been exposed to other kinds of political philosophies besides, the very kind of like conservative Republican politics, which didn't resonate with me. And it also wasn't cool. That would have been like career destroying for me to start dabbling in conservative Republican politics as an artist and as a young person. I wasn't in that community whatsoever. So for me, it was like, I'm either a leftist or I'm alone. And then I don't even know who I would be. So that was really a pressure point for me once I started to see I feel like a bad person for being pressured to sit here and watch people do obviously terrible, cruel things, say terrible, cruel things, and I'm supposed to justify it because Black Lives Matter or because the system is bad and thus that justifies people taking revenge against it in whatever means they have available to them, which if it's breaking the windows of the local cafe, well, they're just doing what they have to do because they have no other options.
Yeah.
It felt so condescending to me to see people say stuff like that. I was like, I mean, I've grown up in communities that were, lower income. I mean, my family came here from Cuba. That's pretty low income. Like my grandma would have to like hustle to get a head of garlic.
Right.
So, and no one was going to justify being a terrible person to other people because of that. So why are we doing it now here in a country that actually has more opportunity than a place like Cuba?
That's so interesting. I also came from a leftist background. It's one of the reasons I thought it would be really cool to have you on so we could talk about like kind of our similar experiences or like, differences in our political journeys. Have you ever heard of over-socialization? Because I just became familiar with this concept through researching for a different video I'm doing on Ted Kaczynski and the CIA.
Love it.
Because he wrote about this in his manifesto, but I think it's like very true what he was talking about. He thought that a lot of children in America these days are really over-socialized, meaning from a very young age, you're placed with a lot of rules and regulations around not just your actions, but your thoughts and feelings, right? So at a certain point, even thoughts that are natural become immoral, right? Like having anger against someone. And so over-socialized children start to think they are bad, and everyone comes to a point where they need to rebel against the system in some way. But for over-socialized leftists, it's like they need to rebel against the system, but they need to do so in a way that seems morally acceptable. So they pick things like racism or class structure or whatever, and they use that big behemoth of an enemy to justify violence. Because really it's the violence that's like the point. It's not the enemy, it's the violence, right? Because they need to like get out the aggression and anger they feel at being so restricted internally.